Welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. I have done almost 2,000 interviews on my program with many different types of healers who have created a multisensory and non-Western pedagogy in their practices. The cats have had an impact on so many records that my generation and older generations have lived off for years. They play little parts and serve the song as conduits for information from the heavens. For the most part, the cats had a chance to play with the original masters of the music and learn to get out of their own way to become part of the musical conversation. One thing I've realized and been humbled by is the opportunity that has been given to me to gain knowledge and wisdom from these musicians, whose tales I share with people in all parts of the world via the internet. Call it mass distance education, if you will. I have the chance to talk with individuals who have been on this earth longer than myself, have experienced societal shifts, and have invented and reinvented themselves in different musical settings in different parts of the country. As a rogue journalist, I'm searching for that fine line of connection from mind to body to soul. That's where the spirit emerges, and that's what my whole show is about: how to create spiritual music. Nate Mercereau, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you, Jake. I'm really happy to be here.
It's such an honor to have you, brother. I wanted to start by reading you this quote from and then have you riff on it. It's from
Yeah.
the drummer Billy Kreutzmann, who was the Grateful Dead's drummer. And the question was, what musician influenced you most? And he said, Elvin Jones, one of Coltrane's drummers. He said, I couldn't steal a lick from the man, and I wouldn't want to. But what he taught me is freedom, total freedom of expression. That's it, that it's legal to do anything you can think of. And I wanted you to talk a little bit about, when I saw you live perform at the Libby Bowl and just sort of the stuff that I've checked out, people will call your music experimental, or, they'll try to brand it or they'll try to label it. But to me, you're free. You're totally free. And I just wonder if you could talk about a musician, maybe you could steal some licks from that person, but ultimately they taught you total freedom of expression.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm very happy to start here. And I think it's actually great that you brought this up too, because it was kind of the reason that we reconnected was that I follow Tsiji Munoz, who's one of my favorite guitar players. I follow him on Instagram, and he reposted a quote that you posted of his. And it reminded me of our connection that we made in Ojai. And I was like, oh, I got to hit this guy up. We got to do something.
Dude, I
And
just got chills. No, because
yeah,
I just want to be clear, that dude is one of my spiritual teachers, and I thought about it, and I'm like, at the end of the I'm going to send you his phone number. You should connect with him because he is a healer and a teacher on top of obviously just being. And I'm so honored that you saw that quote from one of our interviews, and that's how we reconnected. Go ahead, floor's
yeah,
yours, buddy.
that would be amazing. I would
Yeah, no, you're going to get cooked up. Yeah, go ahead.
I love to CG. He represents total freedom to me. And I think there's a lot of musicians that I could mention, but I'm just going to talk about him because
Please.
he's really special. And I found him at a time in my life where it was really necessary to like see someone fully embodying that freedom, and it just inspired me to do whatever my version is of that. Because I like that quote that you said too, because he was saying, he's like, I'm inspired by the freedom of Alvin, but I also don't want to steal a lick from him, because there's something about that too, of just being inspired by someone's presence and their full like engagement with their thing and their exploration and their life, their whole being. Like that's what I get from Tasiji. It's like I listen to his music, and it's about that like whole journey that he goes on, that he takes you on, that he opens you up to. And I love him. And I've never met him. I've been buying his records kind of, from his website, like, piece by piece, and just kind of getting CDs in the mail. And yeah, I just find him really special. He's really important to me. And
Well, it's such an honor that you're saying this because, I'm not a musician, but yet I've spent a lot of time with him when he
yeah,
lived in New York. Now he lives down in Norfolk. And I just feel like this is he can be a little bit hermetic at times, but the power and the spiritual burn and his own language. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
not even the music part of it. He has given me so much spiritual strength. I can, and so I am so excited for you guys to connect. And I know it's going to take on a whole life of its own musically as well. I mean, when you
Yeah.
talk, I mean, like Billy Kreutzmann, one of my favorite drummers, not a jazz drummer, and a lot of people would say that the Grateful Dead sometimes sound the drummer sounded like shoes in the dryer. But like it's that like pushing the boundaries as far as you can take it. And I guess what I wanted to ask you about specifically is, like I saw you have a gig coming up, San Francisco Jazz Center, I believe. You're playing
Yep.
with my boy. I got to send you that interview, Idris Ackamore, fucking
Oh, you
badass.
interviewed Idris.
Oh yeah,
Amazing.
he's such a
Yeah.
badass. That's why I knew we were like meant to be connected because I'm like the cat
Yeah.
is totally hip to all the cats. But um, are you? Do you feel like um, how? Where are you at in terms of how satisfied are you in terms of the amount of opportunities you get to play live?
Mm,
And what I mean by that is like, the set and setting is key. And if you're playing truly free music, I mean, I saw you play that day with that quartet, and I could have listened to that for like hours. That was like
yeah.
beautiful. But yet, the band that followed, I mean, they're my boys, Grateful Shred, but that's recognizable music as opposed to playing original expression. And I just wonder how often you get a chance to play live, and if you are yearning to actually perform live more.
Yeah, it's a good question because it's kind of got a few answers because I actually do feel really satisfied and fulfilled, especially in my community here in LA, like where we're playing often and we're finding a lot of places to play. There's concert series that like really support what we're doing. There's something called floating. There's something called the Leaving Records, listen to music in the daylight under a tree series.
Hmm.
And there's the World Stage in Los Angeles, which is also great in Leimert Park.
Oh, I love that. Billy Higgins's club.
Yeah, exactly. And Carlos Nino, the percussionist I play with a lot, he
Dude,
it's a
fucking
venue
hero.
called
Unreal.
Townhouse, which is in Venice. So I feel really actually positively about the scene in LA right now and the people I'm connecting with and the people I'm playing music with here. And but there is another part of it too, where sometimes you know, I do want to share it in other contexts. I want to travel more. So, I think I kind of accept all of it as just kind of where I'm at, because I've also haven't been pursuing this type of thing that long. I've been doing a lot of like production work and songwriting with people. So this part of my musical life where I'm doing this like kind of in the moment expression and releasing those type of recordings that represent that's relatively new for me too. So, I'm definitely interested in doing more of it and sharing more of it live and touring and traveling more, but I also feel really good about where it's at right now. So it's kind of both things.
I dig. What was the? Can you talk a little bit about? I know you've done a lot of production work with a lot of cats, a lot of heavy cats, and I just was there. Was it kind of like a lot of hard work, and then you ran into some luck? How did you actually get connected uh, to people that eventually, people were like, wow, this guy is a seriously great producer.
Yeah, there's a few things that happen. I mean, I was a touring guitarist for years. That was kind of my thing. And even
Hmm.
before that, I was just like, how can I make a living playing guitar? So like my whole kind of musical reality started in this really broad way of like, let me play the hotel restaurant gig. Let me teach some lessons. I'll play some weddings. I'll also do my own music. I'm just gonna do it all. And so everything from that point has kind of been like getting more and more into what I'm into, I guess. Like I'm discovering it as I go from like this broad place to maybe even a more specific place. But also within that specific place, I'm finding more and more detail. So, I was like touring with Sheila E for 5 years. That was a big gig for me.
Oh my
And
God.
then yeah, and then from there I would play with Lettucey, Jennifer Hudson. I had this really broad, like kind of touring guitarist life where I was interacting with a lot of different people. And then I would end up recording on their albums. and then maybe we'd write a song at sound check or something, and then that would make it on the record. These like kind of writing credits started trickling into my I guess credit list, and I had some friends who, this is when I was living in the Bay Area, so I had some friends who were in Los Angeles who were kind of getting involved in uh record producing and songwriting in that kind of pop music world. And I started coming to their sessions and writing with them, and it was just this kind of slow progress towards this thing that at a certain point I just looked at the credits list and I was like, oh, there's things happening here. And a close friend of mine, a guy named Ricky Reed, who's a producer for folks like Lizzo and many others, he was like, let's do some stuff together. Let's make some records. So he kind of brought me in to his world, which was my first like official step into kind of like producing records. And yeah, we that started a lot. That was almost the domino that kind of pushed the others over. And then once that happened, and there's like a couple big records out, or bigger than anything that I had done until then, that just kind of started opening doors. And then even more recently, I had always been doing my own music, and I had always been doing just various projects. And I reconnected with Carlos last couple years too, at the Townhouse, because my band was playing there, and we played a set. And after the set, he comes directly on stage, and he like starts like expressing to the audience like, wow, this was special. Like, and in that moment, he's like, anything you want to do together, like on stage, he's like, anything you want to do, let me know. Like, and I was like, oh, this guy's for real. Like, he's in it, and like we connected so deeply, so quickly, that he introduced me to his world that I was already kind of like adjacent to with the music I was making. And then we just like really formed a really special bond that we're still, exploring today, and making a lot of records together, playing on each other's albums. So I kind of, between all of this, I feel like I'm working and making music and expressing in this like really like expansive way. And that's how I like it, because I feel like I can interact with like the type of performance and records that you saw in Ojai, and then also I'm making just things that kind of end up in a more pop space, or kind of anywhere in between too. I really look at it as all one thing, because
I
it kind
dig,
of,
man. No, I want you to talk to the audience. I mean, one of the things that I recognize about the record that and the period of time in music that I love so much, the early 70s, you still had Orrin Keepnews, Joel Dorn, Jerry Wexler. A lot of the guys that were producing records were music fanatics. And so they really had a good taste in music. And I just, I'd love you to talk, maybe give an example of how how you create a vibe in a more pop bag with an artist where the music can still uh, feel good. I mean, so much pop music today, at least to my ears, a lot of electronic tracks.
yeah,
Sometimes there's a lot of audio. I don't want to paint with a broad brush, but there's just a lot of people who they're getting a lot of acclaim, and I'm not sure if they could even perform live,
mhm,
But so I'd love you to talk about how you make a session as authentic and burning as possible, because the Carlos Nina world that you kind of found your way back into, I mean, that's my world. But
yeah.
yet the pop world is really how you sing for your supper, right? I mean, so I'd love you to talk a little bit about how you create a vibe in a less human time in the studios and music in this time.
Yeah. Um, well, when I said it's all one thing, I mean that in the sense that when we're in a session, or I'm writing with someone, or I'm making music with Carlos, or Josh Johnson, or any of these musicians who are kind of in that side of music that I'm in, we're opening ourselves up to that spontaneity, and like that kind of in the moment, how are we feeling, how are we communicating, and playing from there. And I bring that same thing that I experience with Carlos and my records into the pop session. It still starts from there. It's still that like opening
Really?
yourself up to that place.
I
Yeah, because
love it. I love it.
I can't speak for everybody else, but and sometimes I do that and it works really well. Sometimes I do it and it can confuse people. Sometimes I do it,
Yeah.
sometimes I do it, people get really excited. I really don't think there's that much of a difference between like the best pop musician, and by the best I mean someone who is the most open to this type of like creation, like the most open creative person. I think there's like a lot of similarities there. And it could feel very similar where it's like, oh, this is just happening. Like things are kind of unexpectedly coming up. There's like communication happening between the people in the room and the sounds that are happening. And there's these like unexpected beautiful moments and
Mm.
synchronicities that occur. Those happen in both spaces, and really, it starts from that same place in both contexts. And really, any context, that's the thing I bring because that's what I'm interested in. And then what happens after is kind of where the things, you know, go to their respective worlds. Like with myself and Carlos, and um, yeah, I'll just speak about me and Carlos because we're so deep in music making right now.
Mm.
We tend to preserve as much as possible of like that like excitement, that kind of unexpectedness, that curiosity in the music. Like we're like highlighting those moments and we're magnifying them. And so our editing process goes more towards that type of thing. And it's like we've had experiences in life that, lead us to like these places of being like, okay, 7 minutes into this song, we're going to create this huge rush of wind, and like in our with our instruments, and like we just have this language that we're speaking that like uh feels really good for us and makes sense for that type of music. And then in the pop world, it's really not too much different, but you're just making choices based on where that music is going to go. So I also make choices for preservation in that context. I'm often fighting for the preservation of those type of moments in the pop world because there is a tendency in some of that music to make like a safer choice, or to
Absolutely, man.
yeah,
That's what I'm saying.
yeah, to make
Preservation
a
is, yeah. Go ahead.
yeah, to make a broader choice, to
Mm.
like to make something like, oh, we can't do that because that's too crazy, but I think the best pop music ends up doing those crazy things and they end up having the broad appeal. So it's like,
I really appreciate you. You got to open me up to some of this stuff because I'm so tunnel visioned in the
yeah,
Nina, in the Tuskegee burn, Nina Mercereau burn. I just am like, but I know what you're saying is true. Is there an
yeah.
example that you can talk about where preservation ruled the day in a pop record that you produced, and I'm going to go listen to it after to hear some of that spontaneity.
Yeah, let me think about that.
If you want to think about it, we can come back to it later. I'm just, what it is like.
Yeah,
I think this is so important, man. And I also wanted to ask you, without alienating the leader of the of the album, do you feel in some ways? I mean, Miles was like a Zen master. I mean, my interviews with McLaughlin or Billy Cobb and DeJohnette, I mean, he had the craziest way of getting into these guys' heads. Next thing you know, they don't even know what they're doing, but they're
yeah.
playing, and it's perfect. And I just wonder, in your own way, I mean, I can tell you're, a very beautiful cat with a beautiful heart, but do you feel like part of your responsibility, especially with a pop artist, without making sure that it's still going to get to the pop charts, do you feel like it's your job in some ways to get them out of their original mindset and sort of push them out of their comfort zone? Or,
Absolutely.
okay, so
Absolutely.
you think even in the studio, you still try to do that? I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, yeah. And I try to do that, with the conversations that we're having before the music is made, because so much happens in those moments too, with like songwriting and like, like and I'm not a pushy presence, but I am like gonna show up with my full energy. And my full energy is someone who wants to connect, wants to kind of, get to the core of something, and I want
I
to
dig.
like.
Hmm.
And I also I've found such richness in music in my life and such like deep experience with it, and with just the beautiful relationships I have with musicians and friends who I call like truly close, like family friends, and I sometimes feel like it is my job to be like, hey, that's available. That we can all do that. Like, it truly is available for all of us. Like
I
we
love
can
this,
go
dude.
there,
Oh my
and
God.
like you can go there in any context that you're ready for, So I'm not sitting in sessions being like, listen to Pharaoh Sanders like right now. I'm like, but at the
No, I
same
want you to
time,
talk how because it's really important, man. Like because like I'm not a producer, but sometimes my anxiety will lead me to become too pushy. So I want you to talk about how you stay in your you bring that presence enough though that it's comfortable enough to the leader to be open minded to actually take suggestions. I think this is so important.
yeah, yeah, and I really do it without saying much. I don't even the things we're talking about, it's all kind of just happening for me. Like I'm
Mm-hmm.
just kind of going in and being myself, and then I'm referencing these things. I'm pulling these things in, and I'm not even bringing it up as like something that, oh, you should know this or you should know that. I'm just kind of doing it, and then if I do it and there's a good response like in the room, then it's like, all right, we're off.
Cooking. You're
Here we
cooking,
go.
baby. Yeah, baby.
So that's when it gets really fun. That's when I start to feel like safe, I guess, too. And by safe, I mean safe to fully express myself. Because I do also relate to you on kind of like there is a element of like, oh, are they going to be able to accept me, basically? Are they going to be able to accept what I'm bringing, and accept who I am? Because that is kind of what it's like when you're doing these more pop sessions where the kind of uh the name of the game can be a bit more fast paced, where you're like, okay, you're in a room with these people today, you're in a room with these people. There is an element of that. So it's kind of like,
Because the truth is that well, you make a good point because blood, sweat, and tears. They'd have they'd rent out RCA studios for 2 weeks. I mean the studio time
right.
is so it's so there is an element of like getting through it. I wonder about also how much creative control. I mean, you have the production credit, but if like I just wonder about is there somebody over you that could potentially like essentially like an editor or do you have full creative control of the creation of the tunes?
That's very circumstantial, depending on which artist I'm working with, which other producers I'm working with. There's been a few records that I've felt like I was able to follow it through like all the way with the artist and the label and everybody. But also, to be like very honest, the last like maybe 3 years, um sorry, the last like 2 years have been me starting to produce records with artists top to bottom, just me. And that has allowed me to kind of see things through more. So that music is actually still coming out. So a lot of the production credit I have is actually my collaboration with other producers
I
too.
dig. I dig.
So um
But so in this sense, the
but
last couple of years, you've made a concerted effort to really just channel the Mercereau ethos into the music, and you don't have anybody cut it, clipping stuff.
yes, you
Yeah.
could definitely say that. And I'm starting to do that more, and I find it really fulfilling. But also, I don't want to write off the previous work because I did it with like friends like Ricky Reed, and we have a working relationship where we kind of, you use each other's strengths, to create something that we couldn't make alone either. So, there are circumstances though, like where records are being made and then they get to a certain point and a label person or someone with, basically the money is kind of being like,
Hmm.
oh, you got to do something more like this. And that is admittedly can be very difficult for me. Sometimes it's not difficult. I think it really depends on the communication, because like that's what I'm really interested in, is kind of having a good communication experience with people. And when things kind of come from the top down that feel like they're kind of squishing me, or like kind of like making me like kind of dampen my natural energy, that is becoming more and more difficult for me to deal with. But at the same time, I haven't experienced it too much, and I have a pretty good radar for when that stuff starts to happen. So I kind of just like energetically can go like, okay, if that's happening, that's fine. I've done what I'm going to do on this piece of music, like we'll finish it, and I'll kind of energetically place it where it needs to go, and then kind of like, but I'm not saying it's not painful sometimes, because sometimes you're like, man, I love this, and an opinion. I mean, yeah, I mean, because
Well,
when
no,
you're
but
making,
what I'm saying, what the larger point is that what's happened at a grand scale. Clearly, you have your own genius and you found your kind of your purpose in life. But at the grand scale, it's like the bean counters, which the people with the money are making calls about the art. And that's when it just drives me insane. It's like there was this magical period in our history where the bean counters were making a lot of dough and they were like, okay, well, these guys are making us money. We're going to leave them alone. I remember talking to
Yeah.
John Densmore about that. And like, Elektra was basically a boutique label. And those cats were like, everybody's in the black. We're all doing okay. And they're making good music. Let's leave them alone. And then when you get those people that come in over the top, start to dampen you, again, you know, I guess maybe if you could talk, this is also very important. Not that, but you are a gifted player. People, how have you just learned to get out of your own way, let kind of lose your ego? Because that's a long process for people. And, for me, pride can get in the way sometimes. I'm getting much better at just sort of letting things completely go. But and I also work for myself, so it's not a big deal. But did
Mhm.
you have a experience like early in your career where it was you recognize that you're just playing your part in this whole thing, and that um, you know you realize that that just to kind of get out of your own way and really learn to check your ego at the door.
Yes, I have had a lot of experiences like that, but it's interesting because it kind of came from a place of actually just feeling excited to be
Mm.
like called by someone like Sheila E to play guitar for her. So like it's experiences like that that made me go like, you know what? I'm just gonna be that guitar player. I'm gonna learn a lot of like Prince guitar. I'm gonna learn a lot of this type of thing. I was so hungry and interested in like these other worlds that I didn't really feel like it was an ego check. It felt more just like, let me just get involved in this thing and just do this. And
That's absolutely, yeah, I mean, that's the opposite of what I'm saying. I mean, because you're basically embracing whatever they're asking you to do. You're not like, I'm going to go
yes,
in and do my own thing.
but what's interesting now is like since my kind of musical, and life journey has been this thing that started so broad and so just grateful to be making music as a living in general. And now it's kind of getting into this closer space of like, okay, well, what do I actually want to do, with music, which is why I've started to release my own records in the last few years. It's like, I don't want to say I'm building my ego up because that's not really it. But at the same time, I'm kind of like really starting to stand for things that I really like kind of believe in enthusiasm. So it it's actually becoming even more difficult for me to kind of like put that aside because I'm like, oh man, I really believe in this thing. So it's like,
Well, I would say this.
yeah,
This just popped into my head. The word that you're talking about is legacy, what you stand for. And so I think part of the angst, if you're feeling the angst, is recognize that a lot of the creation that you're doing now, is going to live on long after you've left this planet. And I realize that about my own work too. Like it's inspiring people today, and that's all I care about. But it also is going to have shelf life long after we've left this planet. And so take you have so many chapters left to build a legacy of things that you believe in. And and the idea that if it doesn't necessarily take on some real relevance in this lifetime, it will go on long after you left this planet, man.
yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I am expressing like a little bit of I guess there's a little bit of frustration, but it's because of something that feels really true and like special to me, and that's what I was saying. I was saying something earlier where I was like, as I get more into the specific place, there's actually more there. It's like you can't go deep enough into music. Everything like the further you go, there's just more and more and more. And it's just this amazing place to like explore and express yourself. And this is just where I'm at as a 34-year-old man on the planet right now. I'm not making
Ah,
any
you're great, man. You're
I'm
doing
not making
great,
any
man.
like no predictions for how I have to be and no like apologies for how I've been either. It's just kind of like this is just where I'm at. It's like these worlds are opening up and I feel so lucky to be able to explore them with like great depth and to share this enthusiasm. That's really what I try to share with it, and um, you
Well, that
know,
was the first time I met you. I mean, because I'm just like sort of like a dog with a bone, and I was like so fired up, and that energy sometimes can, by less secure people, can be misconstrued, and I feel like going back to the production hat for a minute. I mean,
yeah,
I just feel like there are people, that you must have come in contact with who maybe have no clue some of the suggestions you're making or some of the things are going to work, and either they've never done it before or it's just so far outside their comfort zone that it's just that to me is the genius and the ability to sort of make it work when you can get somebody who's got a deer in the headlights look, or they're really, and yet you still through your own temperament can get them to a point when the music is not just palatable, but there's a soul element to it, and that's really,
yeah.
there must be. I mean, what do you do with people who are looking you like you're born cross-eyed, when you're making suggestions because they've only worked with a, you know I don't know. I would love you to talk about. I think it's just really important because, like you said, communication and earnest energy is absolutely, I could not have said it any better in terms of the ability to then create good music.
Yeah. Yeah, when I'm in those situations where I'm feeling like I'm not connecting, or like I feel like I'm not able to like really bring my full thing, it's it can be hard, but at the same time, it only takes one little moment of like that working for some people to be like, "Oh,
Yeah, I
oh, I
dig.
see how
I
this could
dig.
go."
Uh, uh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like sometimes just gotta be like just it's trust. That's really what it is. You're trying to build trust with somebody who like might not have experienced the thing that you're going for or that you're doing, and then when it works, there's like it's just one of those feelings in the room where people are like, whoa, like that's really special, it's like, yeah, we could get there, so i I try to persevere, really, just kind of like just like ask for some trust and like openness to like let's just explore this, like I love that exploratory period of like writing a song. That's the best to me, is like when it's first starting and you have these really long form kind of open ideas before we're trying to like kind of put it in, which before we're trying to carve it into the perfect thing for
Of
this.
course, yeah, yeah.
That's I love to spend a lot of time there because that's when like that trust can be established. So I really try to establish that trust conversationally, like talking a lot before making music. Like I was in a session with, I guess I could name almost anybody I've worked with, but like just recently I was in one with Sean Mendez where we talked for like 3 hours and we just got into what life was like. And then the song happened in like 10 minutes after that. And
Wow.
it's like
Huh.
sometimes that's how it goes. You're just like, oh man, we actually just connected. We got together, we talked about what's going on. Like that's
You,
where that trust happened, and then the song just kind of took care of itself because it was a result of this nice time we had together, this like connection we made.
talking to Nate Mercereau here on the Jake Feinberg Show, having a ball. When you work with Carlos Nina,
It's Nino, by the way. I just want to.
Nino, excuse me, Nino. A, you know, um, when you talk about that sort of environmental sounds, or like the ability at the 7 minute mark to turn into some sort of huge wave or natural progression, is that stuff like I noticed when I was when you guys played, even though it was a criminally short set. I felt like a lot of it was telepathic. Would you say that you, before a set of that kind of music, do you sketch some stuff out, or will you kind of just make eye contact and say, you know, elements? Or, I mean, how
Yeah.
spontaneous, how much planning goes, if at all, goes into these performances where you're adding all this ethereal sound?
Yeah, yeah. I would say we do both of those things. Sometimes we show up and we're just like, there's no plan. We're just feeling it. Let's just go, and that happens often. And then other times, we will have a light sketch, but it's interesting things to us where we're just kind of like, okay, let's start this one huge, like a big wave of like love, and then let's bring it down. Let's exist in this place for a while, and then maybe after that, we'll go to this progression that like maybe Carlos and I will be like, okay, we're gonna go to that place, that place. Like we have fun terminologies that we like to use, like, oh, let's go in the forest here, and that means something for me and Carlos, where we're like, I'm gonna play a certain type of chord that like feels exploratory,
Oh,
and
I
like
love it. I love
Carlos
it.
might go into his kind of like uh nature sounds, or play a a piece of brush that fell from a tree on the side of the road, or I might do like my kind of bird call impression, like, and it's that's how we like to do it. And I think it's just because that's kind of how we live our lives too. Like we love I love going in the ocean, like I have a lot of connection to like the natural places, and uh just things like wind energy, and just kind of existing with no tempo but also multiple tempos at the same time. Like we just kind of try to. I guess we don't even try, honestly. It's just what we do. It's like it's the place that we're excited to explore these days. So it's completely free. Even when we have these little structures, it's like if it doesn't happen, that's also fine. We just kind of like go, and that's always fun. At the end of the show, we look at each other like, "Hey, we didn't do that thing, but this thing happened," So
Dude,
it's
it
like,
is so organic and it's so burning. And I was just, that dude was like, he was channeling like Aerto with all that percussion he had. He had like,
yeah,
rubber
yeah.
rubber chicken. It's insane.
Carlos is a very special musician and presence, not only for me, but for a lot of people in Los Angeles and around the world. He's very incredible producer in the way that he brings people together, and he's a supportive, exploratory presence. And I've learned a lot and continued to learn a lot from him. And I think the reason we've just been making so much music is that we we just connect in that way. And I offer my presence as well, and it's very supportive. We have um him and I work together a lot with other guests too, so we kind of bring our thing and bring people into it. Like we've done trios with Idris Akamor, which was you know transcendent and incredible, because Idris is like an elder to us, and to play with him and for him to connect with us and us
Ah,
to connect with him, it was
sick.
like, oh wow, we're like multi-generational like friends, like we just like because when we played with Idris the few times, and when we're gonna play again, we didn't make any plan. It was just like, let's go, and it was like amazing experience. Idris plays on another level. I truly think he's an incredible person and musician. So yeah, that's a long answer to your question, but
No, it's just fine.
it really,
I mean, he is a,
yeah,
I mean, a bunch of stuff is going through my head. Idris is such a magical cat. I mean, if somebody listens to this interview tomorrow, 2 weeks, 7 years from now,
yeah.
and do you believe that you can, based on your own experience, do you believe that we're so in this formula trip, not musically, but like the idea that every college has a jazz program now. Every school has a music program. You go back to the late 60s, it was Berkeley, North Texas, maybe one other school. But for the most part, it was street scholars. You were learning to play off by ear, off records of the radio, and basically learning on the bandstand. And I just wonder what you would say to younger cats who are interested in the conversation, like we've been talking about, interested in production, maybe not totally trusting their instinct and intuition, but they have some of these natural skills. Did you take the path of the academy? Do you believe it's a necessity in music today?
Yeah, a lot of things going through my mind. I would say the simplest thing I could say to a young musician, and I'm kind of thinking of myself when I was
Yeah.
younger now. I'm like, what would I have wanted to hear? And it's like really trust and love yourself through your exploration process, because the things that make you feel emotion, or the things that you're feeling, are true for you. And if you're expressing them and exploring them through music, and you're finding fulfillment through that, that's it. Go further into that. Go further into those things, even if they're strange, or like they feel like maybe they're not what you've heard before. That's like the special place that you can really continually like go to. Music is endless in that way, and it's always there for you, and it's just really special. So I would encourage, you know young Nate or any young person to just like really value your own feelings and your body feeling when you're making music, and just kind of give yourself to that experience, and it's really, you can love yourself and life a lot through that type of expression and that experience, you know. And I,
Did you say that young Nate because maybe you were hearing some really cool sounds that you possibly walked away from because you were like, this is too weird? Or did you
well,
actually,
a little bit of that.
yeah.
It's more that I was kind of like, okay, I love music. I am like, this is incredible. Like, I'm experiencing so many things. I'm playing an orchestra, I'm playing French horn, I'm playing guitar in the jazz band, I'm in the marching band and French horn. I'm like listening to classical music, I'm listening to like punk rock and like jazz. And it was because I also came up when it was like YouTube was first coming out. So I had everything available to me. So it was just amazing to like discover music. And I pretty quickly was like, okay, how do I do this? Like I wanted to like make a living at it. So I kind of went to the route of like, okay, I could like play for other people. I could learn, I could be a craftsman on the guitar. I could become incredible at this instrument, and like I could do anything, you know, if I could do that. So I don't, I guess I get emotional talking about it because now when I make music, I actually remember that age quite a bit when I'm making music.
Mm-hmm.
It's as if
Mm-hmm.
I'm going back to that first time where I'm like, oh yeah, this fully exploratory thing. And I'm also not saying I got hurt or jaded too much by the other process. It was what it was, and it continues to be. But I am making music now that really taps into that thing. And it's almost like 15-year-old me is like catching up to 34-year-old me now, and he's like invited again, you know? So
Wow.
it's like,
Wow. Wow. That's
yeah,
powerful shit.
yeah. So I just really feel it, strongly when I talk to younger musicians, like, yeah, there is a way to like practically get good at your thing if that's a desire you have to, you know, to like be able to do multiple different things. It was the path that I took, is the path that leads me to where I'm at right now. It's why I, you know, am in the position I'm in, you know, and I'm super grateful for it to be able to interact with all these different things. And if there was something through the process that I wanted to pay attention more, it is that like body feeling of just like pure expression and like loving it and just that like pure presence. So that's the thing that I value so much in my life now. And I valued it through that time as well, but I'm just like, I'm really honing in on it these days. So I encourage people to allow that to be meaningful for them.
Easier said than done when you're like a teenager and like not so self-assured. But as you get
Totally.
older, more experienced, I love that you're able to part of it's also just staying youthful and staying inspired within the music. I mean, are you I going back to the question I asked you before about playing live, do you feel like within these, and I think it's also beautiful that you have all these live gigs, but um can you talk about like the a certain band, are you able to play with the same cats and in one of these gigs, whether in Venice or locally, where you start to, we talked about trust before, but if
Yeah.
you're meeting somebody in the studio for the first time, it's going to take a minute to build trust. And do you have a working band on the bandstand that the trust is there so that you feel like you're all breathing like one living, breathing organism?
Yes, definitely. And also that band is kind of turning into more of a, I don't even know if collective is the right word, but just kind of like people I know that
Mm-hmm.
are like-minded and open to it. So a lot of it happens with Carlos and I. Um, and we have a trio with a keyboardist named Surya Bodafacina, who you might be aware of. He grew up here in California on the ashram that was created by Alice Coltrane. So he kind of grew up
Jeez.
watching her and learning from her how to play organ. And he also toured with the Alice Coltrane singers when they put that record out, I guess
Sure.
several years ago now. So Surya, um, myself, Surya, and Carlos have been going deep together and playing a lot. So that trio has its own thing. We also play, a couple of my records feature a saxophonist named Josh Johnson, and that trio, also with the drummer Jamire Williams, is pretty well documented on a couple of my records. And yeah, and there's like, I mean, I could kind of go down the list of people, but those Will Logan in New York too, the drummer. and Aaron Shaw, saxophonist. Yeah, I mean, we have this kind of ever growing group, but those two, I'd say myself, Suri, and Carlos, we're really in on that trio these days. We have a trio record that is made right now. We have another one that's kind of waiting in the wings that was recorded live at this place called the Church of Sound in London. Um, yeah, so we do have kind of like a band in a way, but it's quite open to kind of who's available, and then the sound kind of morphs depending on that. That's why like that trio is going to San Francisco, and Idris is going to join us, and we've never played. So like myself, Carlos have played with Idris. Uh, Surya has not, but there's just total trust that it's going to
Oh, that
work.
thing's gonna you're blow the roof off that place, dude. That's
Yeah, I'm incredibly excited.
unbelievable.
Yeah,
I
so
mean,
like
do you guys, I mean, because it's, you talk about availability, which is
yeah,
hard because, you gotta take certain gigs and, production. I mean, do you guys, I mean, because you love each other so much and you're playing so much cosmic music, are you jonesing to sort of road dog it together and see I mean, after 2 or 3 weeks, that some of those tunes might, I mean, you go into the stratosphere, or maybe you already have done that, but I mean,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, go ahead.
Yeah. I guess I'm not super interested in road dog.
Yeah, no, it's a rough, dude. It is. I'm telling you, man, you got to be cut from a certain cloth in today's world because unless you're doing it in grand style and you're like Tower of Power or something, some note, otherwise you're dogging it. So I don't blame
It's
you.
tough, and I've also been in that world before because I spent so much time like touring with artists, So it's not that I'm opposed to it. Like we just went to Europe, last year with that trio and played for about a week and a half, like 5, 6 shows, which was amazing. And then we came back, we did the New York Jazz Festival. We did 5, 6 shows in like 5 days. So, we're not opposed to getting involved and doing it, but I also am like, you know, I'm I have a young daughter. She's a year and a half old, and I have a studio at home here, and we make so much music in LA, and we're traveling to San Francisco. I guess I like to find the balance of it. I'm fully immersed in the music, and I feel really great about it. And if someone asks us, there's an opportunity for us to like go on a month-long tour, I think we'll do it, but also I'm not necessarily putting pressure on that situation. I think if that type of thing comes up naturally based on the music and the way it's resonating in the world, then we'll be there for it for sure,
Hey,
but
man,
we're
yeah, you
also
got. I
kind of,
mean, and my God, my daughters are 17 and 11, and it goes so darn fast that
yeah,
young period is when they're babies. It's just it breaks your heart open, and you can dream more. And I would, and you know what, you don't have to do it. So unless it, organically comes around and it makes sense. But I just think knowing the kind of attitude that you guys take to the bandstand, it would be like tour de force kind of stuff. It'd be very fiery,
totally. We're,
you know.
we would love it, we're aware of it, we feel really strongly when we're in these places. It's meaningful for us to go to places like, you know across the world and do what we do. We don't take it lightly, so. And there's also so many records, like we're really deep in the studio, so the music is happening all the time, even when we're not like billed as often, like we're at each
Totally.
other's
No, I
houses.
dig. You're just in a bath, a sonic bath all the time.
Yeah,
Some
we're doing it, so yeah.
I you know I often I have my show revolves around the four L's, and one of the L's is life. And
Mm.
what I mean by life is overcoming adversity. And I was hoping you could talk about a time in your life when you were really fighting it, or you were really struggling with an issue, or how to deal with it, but ultimately how you overcame it and how it made you a stronger person.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, a few things come into mind, but you know, I I don't know if I've ever been a person who has hit like I guess a Hollywood version of rock bottom, but I've also been in a place like kind of before my child was born where I was kind of making decisions that weren't really respectful to myself. and I was doing things that were, just I it's just kind of all the stuff I was doing a little bit, and it was kind of like it was because I wasn't really honoring who I was, and I was feeling like I wasn't able to just be myself. And the things that I was doing was actually masking that even more. It's like
Right.
I was becoming a person who was using marijuana to the point where it was like, oh, I'm I'm me still, but I'm me influenced by this thing, or I'm me influenced by that. Or it could even be something like, oh, I'm me too influenced by the opinion of others. I'm me too influenced by the outside world. Like what is my like who am I? I guess it was kind of like a crisis of that type of thing. And just like I was I was like kind of at risk of losing the relationship that I'm currently in. And like, yeah, I just yeah, man, I
What
just
what,
kind of
what
had
was the? And this is very important because
yeah.
we all are fighting that all the time. But I mean, to me, how did you come back from that brink to preserve the relationship and then authentic? I mean, because to me, it's a fine line. I mean, you know, Steve Gadd. I mean, he was so he was so addicted to hard drugs that he had to move. He was the number one studio cat in the city. He had to move out of New York. He couldn't see his kids. He almost lost everything. And that's
Yeah.
the extreme. But ultimately, like, what was the moment or what was the point that sort of brought you back from the abyss and now gives you can honestly say, well, nobody's perfect. You're more Nate Mercereau in the flesh than being masked by other things.
Yeah. I mean, man, it was really that thing that you almost just said right there, which was like, I need to know who I am. I need to, it's for my benefit, and it's for this cosmic benefit to like allow myself to be the most myself, and to kind of like let go of these judgments, and like just like because it's the relationship with the other person, the relationship with my daughter, the relationship with the outer world, that is all kind of secondary to the relationship with myself. And it's like, do I really love being alive? Do I really love doing this?
Hmm. Hmm.
And I had to be like, yeah, I do, but I have to push everything else out, because it all starts with the relationship with myself, and the love starts there. And you know, I guess it's a little hard to talk about, because there's certain things that I don't necessarily feel comfortable saying publicly, but
Absolutely not. No, don't you don't have to.
I'm
No,
also
but
trying
I
to
understand. Yeah, I did.
yeah, but I'm also trying to get to the core of this feeling, which is incredibly meaningful to me, of just like, yeah, like truly loving it and myself, and allowing myself to just be. And it was a curiosity really that kind of made me go like, why have I been there was this question I was saying. I was like, why have I been like avoiding this? Like what's behind this? And when I started like really looking at it, there were just so many things that I was kind of like, hey, what's behind this door? What's behind this door? And then start to go back,
Oh
to like
man.
early things in your life where you're like, oh my goodness, like since I guess the age 15 for me comes up a lot, which something must have happened to me at that point, where I was just like, I made a shift to like try to become something, like instead of allowing myself to become.
Well,
So
that's the whole thing. It's you nailed it because in this entire conversation, you've been. I'm a Taoist. I received the Tao like 10 years ago, and it just fundamentally changed who I was. All my habitual nature fell away. Obviously, I'm still working on my true nature, but what you're talking about is just being, just
yeah,
and not, you know, there's a whole, sort of smorgasbord of things that get in the way or that shroud your ability to access your true nature. But ultimately, if you can be, and then while you're being, you can create, and while you can create, that creation inspires other people, then you can actually completely eliminate your karma. And then then all bets are off because at that point, you're just you're just on fire. And Tasiji talks a lot to me about this, and but essentially you're on your way into the intergalactic, man. If you're not already there, I mean, I think you already are there, but it's just that is such an interesting, and it can be an unnerving place for people. But I feel like you're getting more and more comfortable being as an intergalactic creature. I think that's really pretty amazing, dude. Because the music also, I mean, I guess that was the other thing is that do you feel like when you were talking about talking to younger cats and young Nate, like when you're experimenting and you get into something quote unquote weird or non-traditional musically, do you believe that ultimately helped you find your own individual sound? I mean, I've never heard you play, you know, Wes Montgomery chops or Kenny Burrell, kind of Pat Martino, all these beautiful people. But
Mm.
I'm sure I know you have that ability, but ultimately, clearly you're not a bebop, post bop. I mean, you're kind of creating new language. Do you feel like you helped that early experimentation, however much you leaned into it, helped you find your own individual sound?
Absolutely. Yeah. And now when I find something that sounds strange or weird or gives me that kind of feeling of like, oh, is something wrong? Or is like something I don't know what's happening. Now I get incredibly excited because I'm like, that's the thing. That's actually what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do those things. Like I I definitely spent a lot of time like learning Wes Montgomery, Joe Pass, and like transcription. And so all of those like John McLaughlin too, and like to CG, like they've all seeped into my being because of just the way of life. But that unexpected place of like experimentation where I find the thing, that's what I try to play now. It's like let's find as much of that and build my own vocabulary, you know. So yeah,
I mean, do you feel that you know, you had the bebop period, you had post bop, and then obviously that early fusion period. Um, do you feel like uh, there's? I just feel like in jazz or melodic improvisation or even experimental music. I mean, is there new vocabulary that you feel you're coming across as it relates to like jazz music, or is it not even something you can label? I just feel like we've been stuck without a lot of new vocabulary for a long time. And I just wonder, from your point of view, what you're hearing in your own music with your own bands that you consider maybe new vocabulary.
interesting. Yeah, I think there is some new vocabulary happening, and I don't want to sound like, I
No,
guess
I'm asking you.
pretentious in
You
that
just
way.
answered, yeah, totally.
Yeah, but I do feel like that's what we're leaning into. That's what we like.
Yeah,
That's the thing that we're into. That's the thing that kind of bonds all the people that I like to play with, actually. That's kind of what forms the groups that I'm putting together is like, are these people explorers? Are they willing to have a moment of uncertainty? Are they willing to like have time in the music where it's like, I don't know what this is, like
being
and
totally vulnerable. I love that.
yeah, it's a vulnerability, it's trust, and to not run away from it when it happens, to not play a cliche in that moment, to like,
Hmm.
let's actually just sit here. And if that means we don't play for a second and like the room gets silent, oh my God, like that's like incredibly special, like incredibly powerful too. Cause like there's so much room for things to happen in those places. And
Totally.
yeah, and I think vocabulary wise, I think of vocabulary in a broader sense with our music because it's not just like the lead lines I'm playing, and it's also the atmosphere that we're creating. It's the intention of the music too. It's also the structures. It's all of those things.
I
So
love this. And
I
nailing it.
open yeah, I open the vocabulary up to all of those things. It's the mood we're creating. It's the like the kind of like, maybe deep like psychedelic journeying space that like we're like, sizzling in together, like and just kind of staying there or like exploring it and like bringing in a nice cool breeze or whatever, however you want to think about it, like all that's our vocabulary. That's the vocabulary I'm interested in exploring and interested in bringing in, which is why we play in tempo, but tempo is another thing that we kind of play with too, where it's like Tempo
Dude,
comes
I'm
in.
obsessed with. I cannot wait. I cannot wait for you to tell me that you love tempo shifting because I think that's the best thing in the world. I
Oh
don't
man,
understand. You
yeah,
don't need to be. I was gonna say presentation so like your bands like it's not like oh first there's a guitar solo then there's this. Sometimes there might not even be a solo. You might all be merging together. But to
yeah,
me, that's
absolutely.
vocabulary. You know.
Definitely. Yeah, and tempo for me is a big one, especially right now in my life, because I feel like it's very meaningful to make music not on a grid. And I'm not opposed to the grid either. I actually utilize that in the music as well. That's another part of the vocabulary, but I use it as a a thing to go to, not because it's the only thing to go to. Like I love to play in free time, and if in that free time we kind of fall into a tempo or we create a tempo or we're pushing into something, it's like we will go there, but we're not beholden to it. If at a certain point someone just kind of branches off into something else, it's like I don't know, I just view it as like scenes like kind of overlaying each other, and it's like I love the freedom of not having to play in tempo and in time, and I feel like it's meaningful to do now because it's the thing when I talk to people about our music, like it's the thing that most people bring up. They're like, how, like, what tempo are you guys in? You know? Like
I
we're in
love it. Yeah,
every tempo. Like we're
I
like
love it,
breathing,
man.
like we're breathing
Jesus.
together. We're like merging with the energy of the room and ourselves. And like sometimes, I mean, I've noticed it a lot when Surya, Carlos, and I play, because like there'll be a moment when like Surya is especially like transcendent with these moments, but like we'll think I think the song is kind of going into a certain place. We might be like the energy will kind of be flowing towards an ending type feeling, and Surya will just like explode into this other world, and he'll create this huge wave where we'll just like kind of support him on this journey for a bit, and then it'll kind of come back down, and then maybe Carlos will wave somewhere too. And it's just like, oh man, there's so much room for emotion and staying in the emotions and to like deeper explore them, and then to like also allow so many things to happen. Like, and tempo is just one of those things. It's just one thing that can happen out of many things. And I just that's
No,
open.
because it's great because like you're talking about like some traditional predictable ending, but yet you're going to end on a massive freaking wave of sonic expansion that might last 10 minutes, instead of just
Yeah.
having enormous. To me, that's just, man, like, I just feel that, you know, we're going to have to do set two because, only want to promote, and, I know you have your hands in a lot of different cookie jars and, in terms of production and stuff, but in terms of like, your, like, your heart, fire, love symbol, it is about. I mean, just the idea of what you talking about all tempos and
Mhm.
music that transcends styles and just going with what feels right based on the trust. I mean, that is not easy to come by in this time, and I feel like um, because it's not easy. It's not easy because everyone does rely on the grid. They become hooked on the grid and then they can't get off of the grid.
Mhm.
Or everything is now codified. You have curriculums when in fact it's okay to make up the rules and you're not doing anything, sacrilegious if you have your rudiments in place. So I'm always on the path to find seekers and promote them. Uh, that's I'll do that for as long as my show is on, Nate. So I just bless you, man. We are going to definitely cook again as soon as possible, and I'm going to call it to CG. And when I get the green light, I'll send you his number, and you guys need to connect, man, because I can feel something beautiful in the works coming with you.
Oh man, thank you so much, Jake. I mean, this has been a true pleasure, and I really appreciate all your words. You know, you've gone to a lot of places with your words today that are just really meaningful to me, and
You know what
I
I care
just
about? You know what I care about is that I remember seeing you, and it doesn't bother me either way. But I was like, when you didn't get back to me, I was like, wow, that sucks. I'm like, I don't know what, I'm not sure what, what's going on here. But the fact that it's because you happen to be following my spiritual teacher and I repost a quote from one of my interviews with him that you see, then I know that everything is cosmic. And at that
for
point,
sure, man.
you know what, man?
Yeah.
You deserve him, man. You deserve to CG. So, and based on your whole where you're at, you definitely. I mean, it's gonna happen, man. So yeah, let's stay in touch. It was a ball, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jake. Yeah, we'll do it again.
Yeah, much love, dude.
Much love, Jake.
Be cool. Peace.
Peace.